Not to the grief counselors who left their pamphlets on the kitchen counter and never came back. Not to the teachers who sent home notes about classroom behavior and used words like withdrawn and non-responsive. Not to the nannies, and there had been 3 of them in 14 months, who quit because a child who would not speak was, in their words, too much to take on alone. None of them reached Caleb. He was 7 years old, and he had not spoken a full sentence since the February morning his mother drove to the grocery store and did not come home. Renelle Asante-Boateng had built her company from a studio apartment in Scarborough with $1,200 and a second-hand laptop. By the time she was 41, Nexacore Analytics had offices in Toronto, Calgary, and Austin, and her face had appeared on the cover of Report on Business twice. She knew how to move through rooms. She knew how to read people faster than they expected to be read. She knew how to solve things. She did not know how to reach her own son. That was the shape of her life the morning Petra Menza-Osi arrived at the house on Glenrose Avenue. The position had been listed quietly, through an agency the family lawyer recommended. Renelle had not posted it publicly. She did not want the applications that came when people recognized her name. She wanted someone who would come to the house and be steady. That was the word she kept using in her own mind. Steady. Not brilliant. Not certified in child development. Just steady. The way certain people are steady. The way a table is steady. The way the floor holds. Petra arrived on a Tuesday in early October when the maples on the street were turning. She was 38, with a quiet face and a way of standing that suggested she was in no particular hurry. She carried a canvas bag and wore a dark green jacket that had been washed many times. She did not appear impressed by the house, which Renelle noticed and appreciated. The interview lasted 40 minutes. Petra had worked for 11 years as a personal support worker, then 3 years with a family in Rosedale, whose youngest son had selective mutism following a car accident. She spoke about that boy with the same tone she used to describe everything else: level, unhurried, careful. She did not say she had fixed him. She said they had spent a lot of time in the backyard watching birds. Renelle hired her on the spot. What she did not tell Petra, what she told no one, was that she had decided to spend the first 2 weeks working from the house, not visibly. She had a room on the 3rd floor that functioned as a secondary office, with a window that looked out over the backyard and a sightline to the kitchen windows below. She told her assistant she was doing deep work. She cleared her calendar of everything non-essential. She needed to see, without being seen, what this woman was like when no one was watching. It was not a flattering thing to admit, even to herself. She had grown up watching adults perform kindness when they thought it mattered and drop it the moment it cost them something. She had learned early that the version of a person that showed up for a job interview was a construction. The version that showed up on a Tuesday afternoon when a child refused to come down for lunch. That was the real one. So she watched. The first 3 days, Petra did not try to engage Caleb directly. This was unexpected. The previous nannies had all, in their different ways, made attempts. Games, snacks, gentle coaxing, enthusiastic suggestions. Caleb had tolerated them the way he tolerated everything since February, with a stillness that looked like patience but was actually absence. Petra did not do that. She moved through the house doing what needed to be done. She made meals and left them. She sat in the kitchen with a book in the afternoon. She did not follow Caleb. She did not narrate what she was doing in the bright, explanatory voice that adults sometimes used with quiet children. She simply existed in the same space, unhurried, the way someone exists in a room they are very comfortable in. On the 4th day, Caleb came downstairs at 2 in the afternoon and sat at the kitchen table without being asked. Petra was making tea. She put a glass of apple juice on the table near him without comment, then went back to the counter. She did not sit down across from him. She did not ask how he was. She stood at the counter with her tea and looked out the window at the backyard for a while. And then she said, to no one in particular, that there was a black-capped chickadee on the fence post and that they were bolder than people gave them credit for. Caleb looked at the window. He didn't say anything, but he looked. Renelle, watching from the third-floor window, set down her coffee and forgot to pick it up again for a long time. By the end of the second week, Caleb was coming downstairs every afternoon. He still did not speak in full sentences. He said yes and no, and occasionally a single word that indicated preference. Juice, outside, blanket. But he came downstairs, and he sat near Petra, and there was something in the quality of his silence that was different. Renelle had spent 14 months cataloging her son's silences. She knew their textures. This one was not the closed, locked silence of the previous year. It was something more like the silence of a person who is listening carefully. She could not explain it to herself in any concrete way, which bothered her, because she was a person who explained things concretely for a living. She extended her third-floor working arrangement without announcing it. On the Thursday of the third week, she was on a call with her CFO when she heard something from the backyard below. She stepped to the window and looked down. Petra and Caleb were on the back step. Caleb had a blanket around his shoulders, which he had taken to carrying through the house the way some children carry stuffed animals. Petra was sitting beside him, not close but near. They were both looking at the fence at the back of the yard. Then Petra leaned down and said something, not loud enough for Renelle to hear from the third floor. Something quiet, directed only at Caleb. And Caleb put his face in his hands. Not in distress. Renelle knew that expression. She had seen it too many times in the past year, and her body recognized it before her mind did. This was different. This was the way a person covers their face when something reaches them that they were not prepared for. His shoulders were not shaking. He was not crying in the way she had seen him cry before. He sat very still with his face in his hands, and Petra sat beside him and put one hand lightly on his back, and did not move it, and did not say anything else. After a while, Caleb took his face out of his hands and looked at the fence again. Petra said something else. Caleb nodded, slowly. Then, in a voice so quiet that Renelle had to press closer to the glass to be sure she had heard it, Caleb said, "I miss her." 2 words and a pronoun. 3 words. The first 3 words that approached the shape of that particular sentence in 14 months. Renelle stepped back from the window. She sat down on the edge of the desk chair. She was still on the phone with her CFO. He was talking about Q4 projections. She was not hearing any of it. She told herself she would stop working from the third floor at the end of that week. She had seen enough. Petra was, in every observable sense, exactly who she had presented herself to be. There was no performance. There was no visible effort, which was itself a kind of answer. Some people are kind the way others are logical, as a natural property, not a project. She did not stop working from the third floor. She told herself this was because she had become used to the space. The light was good in the afternoon. The quiet was useful. These things were true, but they were not the reason. The reason was harder to name. It had something to do with the fact that after 14 months of managing Caleb's grief as a logistics problem, finding the right therapist, the right school support plan, the right nanny, she was watching someone manage it as a human problem, and it was working, and it was making her feel something she did not entirely know how to categorize. Relief was part of it. Something that sat adjacent to relief was another part. She noticed things about Petra that she had not been looking to notice. The way she moved through the kitchen. The particular way she listened when Caleb pointed at things, not with performed interest, but with actual attention. The kind of attention that involves the whole body leaning slightly toward the object of focus. The way she laughed at something on the radio one afternoon. Alone in the kitchen, a real laugh, unguarded. Renelle had a boardroom full of people who were good at performing attention. She had spent 20 years learning to tell the difference between the performance and the thing itself. She stopped telling herself she was up on the third floor for the light. The confrontation, if it could be called that, happened on a Wednesday afternoon in November. Renelle had come downstairs to get something from the kitchen. She had been careful to come and go through the front staircase, while Petra and Caleb were in the backyard or the living room, which required a certain amount of deliberate timing that she did not examine too closely. But that afternoon, she miscalculated. Or perhaps some part of her had stopped trying so hard to miscalculate. And she walked into the kitchen at the same moment Petra was refilling the kettle. They looked at each other. Petra said, "Mrs. Asante-Boateng, I didn't know you were in today." Which was, Renelle realized in that moment, a statement that invited a lie. She did not tell the lie. She said, "I've been working from the third floor for the past few weeks." Petra turned off the tap. She set the kettle on its base. She did not say anything for a moment, and in that moment, Renelle was aware that she was being understood. Not judged, not calculated, understood. And the precision of that awareness was uncomfortable. Then Petra said, "I thought I heard someone up there some afternoons. I should have told you directly." Petra looked at her, not unkindly. "He's doing better," she said. "Caleb." "I know," Renelle said. "I've been watching." There was a pause between them that was not hostile and not entirely comfortable, and had the quality of honesty in it, which is its own particular kind of discomfort. "Do you want tea?" Petra said. Renelle sat down at the kitchen table. It had been a long time since anyone had asked her that in this house without it being a staff gesture, a professional accommodation. Something about the straightforwardness of it. The plain offer, no reading of the room, no calculation, made her sit down before she had decided to. "Yes," she said, "thank you." They did not become friends that afternoon. It was not that kind of moment. But something shifted in the quality of the house after that, in the way it had shifted after Petra's first week, like a room after the windows have been opened. Renelle started coming downstairs in the afternoons. Not every afternoon, but some. She told herself it was to spend more time with Caleb, which was true. She did not examine the rest of it too carefully. She had built a company by being precise about what she did not yet know, and she was applying that same precision here, which meant acknowledging that she did not yet know what this was, and proceeding accordingly. Caleb noticed. He noticed in the way children notice things they have been waiting for, without making much of it, absorbing it quietly, a water table rising. One afternoon in late November, the three of them were in the kitchen. Caleb was drawing at the table. Petra was making soup from a recipe that involved more steps than Renelle would have attempted. Renelle was at the counter with her laptop, doing nothing in particular, which was also unusual for her. Caleb looked up from his drawing and said, to no one in both of them, "Is the chicken done?" Petra said, "Almost. Maybe 10 more minutes." Caleb looked back at his drawing. Then he said, "Mom used to let it go too long." The kitchen was very quiet. Petra stirred the pot. She did not make a sound that suggested this was significant, or fragile, or required special handling. She said, "Did it taste different that way?" Caleb thought about it. "Kind of chewy," he said. "Some people like it that way," Petra said. "I didn't," Caleb said, "but she didn't either. She just forgot." He said it without distress. He said it the way people say things about people they miss, with grief in it, but also with the particular tenderness of remembering something specific and small and real. The overcooked chicken. The thing that was both a flaw and a memory and a portrait, all at once. Renelle was looking at her laptop screen. She was not reading anything on it. After a moment, she said, "She forgot a lot of things, but she always remembered the important ones." Caleb looked up at her. He seemed to consider this. Then he nodded, with the seriousness of a person accepting a true thing, and looked back at his drawing. December arrived, and with it the particular difficulty of a house that had not figured out what to do with itself at Christmas. The tree went up because Renelle's sister came over on the first Saturday of the month and simply began putting it up, which was how her sister operated, and which was, on this occasion, the right approach. Caleb helped with the lower branches. Petra made hot chocolate. The afternoon had a shape that felt, to Renelle, like something being rebuilt from plans she did not entirely know how to read yet, familiar in its outline, uncertain in its details. On the Saturday before Christmas, Renelle came home from a morning of back-to-back calls to find the house quiet in an unusual way, not the closed quiet of the previous year. Something else. She found Caleb in the living room, sitting on the floor near the tree, which was lit but not yet fully decorated. The box of remaining ornaments was open beside him. Petra was sitting on the floor across from him, not close but near, the same configuration as the back step in October, and Caleb was holding an ornament and talking, not in full sentences, not yet, not consistently, but talking. A continuous, quiet narration of what the ornament was. A small painted wooden bird her ex-wife had bought at a market in Quebec City years ago, and where it had come from, and how his mother had always put it on the same branch, second from the top on the left side, because she said birds liked height. He was talking about his mother. He was talking about her in the present tense of memory. She said, she liked, she always, not gone, just elsewhere, vivid, available through the particular grammar of people who are held carefully by those who knew them. Renelle stood in the doorway and did not move for a long time. Petra looked up and saw her. She did not change her expression or signal anything. She just held Renelle's gaze for a moment in a way that said, without words, "He is all right, and you are allowed to stand here. And this is yours, too." Renelle leaned against the doorframe. She stayed. She did not plan what happened on the evening of the 23rd. Caleb had gone to bed. The house was quieter in a settled way. The way houses are quiet after children have gone to sleep. Differently weighted, warmer. Petra was getting her coat from the front closet, the same canvas bag on her shoulder, the same dark green jacket that had been washed many times. Renelle was standing in the hallway with a glass of water she had brought from the kitchen and not yet drunk. She said, "You're in tomorrow." Petra said, "Yes, 9 o'clock." Renelle looked at the coat. She looked at the bag. She said, "I want to tell you something before you go." Petra waited. This was one of the things about her. She waited without filling the space with words, which was rare, and which Renelle had noticed in October and continued to notice. "When I listed this position," Renelle said, "I was looking for someone steady. That was the word I kept using. I didn't mean it as a high bar. I think I meant I was tired of things that weren't steady." She paused. "What you've done with Caleb? I don't have a word for it. I've been trying to find one for 2 months. I don't think there is one," Petra said. "He found his way to it himself. I just stayed nearby." "That's not a small thing," Renelle said. "Staying nearby. I've been in rooms with a lot of people who didn't know how to do it." Petra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Neither did I for a long time. I learned it from someone who was patient with me when I wasn't easy to be patient with." This was the most Petra had said about herself in any conversation they had had. And the specificity of it, the admission of difficulty, the acknowledgement of being made by someone else's steadiness, landed somewhere that Renelle had not been anticipating. She said, "Do you want to come for dinner on Christmas Eve? You and your sister, if she's in town. Caleb would like it." She paused. "I would like it." Petra looked at her, not measuring, not surprised, just looking with the same quality of attention she gave to everything, full, without performance. "Yes," she said, "we'd like that." It was not a conclusion. It was not the kind of thing that resolves in an evening or a month or a season. It was the beginning of something that had no name yet, which was appropriate, because the most real things usually start that way. Without a title, without an announcement, only the slow recognition that something is growing in a place that was empty before. Caleb put the painted wooden bird on the second branch from the top on the left side, because birds liked height. He had remembered that on his own. He had said it out loud to both of them, standing on the small step stool in the front room, while the lights on the tree threw soft color on the walls, and the street outside was full of quiet Canadian winter, the particular hush of a snowfall beginning. He climbed down from the step stool and stood between them and looked at the tree for a while. Then he reached out and took Renelle's hand with his right hand, and Petra's hand with his left. Not because anyone had told him to, not because it was Christmas, and that was what you did, but because he was 7 years old, and he knew without knowing how he knew that these were the two people standing nearest to him, and nearness, for now, was enough. The snow kept falling outside. The tree held its light. The house was warm, in the way a house is warm when it has stopped waiting for something, and started, finally, simply being.